Tonight, for the first time, inside Britain's battlefield ER in Afghanistan.
Let's make sure this is immobilised now.
As doctors and nurses from the National Health Service join the war against the Taliban. Saving lives under fire.
Can you film, mate? I need to start helping.
Taking on the suicide bombers.
To start treating some of these people.
Picking up the pieces.
The biggest killer in military penetrating trauma is loss of blood.
Face to face with the realities of war.
How would I feel if this was my child?
GCS 12, pulse BP 5, treatment O2 count 1 to right arm, morphine 5 milligrams, IV fluids.
April 2008. This is an army field hospital.
106. Equal movements to the chest.
Doctors and nurses are working on a man who's been blown up by a landmine. The blood isn't real, neither was the landmine.
How many's on there? Is that 2 each, is it? Right, that's the first.
This is a training exercise involving part-time territorial army medics who are about to go to war. This ER and the hospital it's in is an exact replica of the one they will be working in when they get to Afghanistan.
The trauma that they're receiving is quite horrific. You do not know what is going to happen. You've just got to be prepared for the worst and be prepared for any eventuality.
Got Lions! Got Matkins!
Territorial Army Headquarters.
Got Ryan!
The rehearsals are over. 100 men and women from Britain's 203rd Field Hospital Regiment are being mobilised.
First of all, make sure you get your body armour and your helmet and your day sack. Double check you've got your passport with you.
They face a 3-month tour of duty. Every one of them has volunteered for this mission. Each has a full-time job in the NHS.
Hello A&E, Dave Hawkins here.
All have been given time off work to go to Afghanistan.
He's a good boy.
Sue James is a grandmother and former NHS children's nurse. She's been what the tabloid press call a weekend warrior for 6 years.
We get called the Saturday and Sunday Club, so, you know, there are quite a few varieties of things that we get called. It's the excitement and the enjoyment, and it's meeting different people. You make such good friends, and it is different. The camaraderie is completely different to working within the NHS. I think the worst part of going away is going to be, you know, leaving the family. My grandson's only 2 weeks old, so that's going to be really difficult.
This will be the second time Captain James, as she now is, will have been to Afghanistan. But most of these doctors and nurses have never been to a war zone before.
It's my last day.
Good luck. Good luck.
Thank you, darling.
I'll see you again. Yeah.
Monday to Friday, David Hawkins is an NHS trauma nurse from Wales, a father of 3 who's renowned for being well turned out and handy with a knife.
This is just my day-to-day desert kit. I've ironed my tops, and tonight now I'm just going to iron my trousers before I pack them, and just hope that there's an ironing board in Bastion. I just feel personally I've got things that I can offer. I just feel it's something that we're able to give back, particularly to our frontline service personnel.
Hawkins is going with his best friend Simon Lawrence, an NHS radiographer who works with terminally ill cancer patients. Lawrence has already been to Iraq and Afghanistan and is a TA captain.
You do have to have an emotional resilience to work in a cancer hospital, I think, but it's different from the sort of emotional resilience and the sort of emotion you get with working in an operational environment where it's very life-threatening, it's very, very quick, it's very fast.
The trip to Afghanistan won't be that fast, 3,600 miles in an RAF transporter.
Oh, hang on, now it's getting closer and it's getting closer, and there's excitement, there's fear, there's apprehension, there's the thought about leaving family behind.
Britain's war in Afghanistan is being fought in the south.
Suspected pressure plate ID that he actually stepped on. Shrapnel to the right inner thigh.
The NHS doctors and nurses are heading for Camp Bastion, deep inside enemy territory, the headquarters of the war machine. 7 kilometres long, 3 kilometres wide, surrounded by 20-foot-high concrete walls. Home to 6,000 Allied troops and a £10 million military field hospital. It deals with around 2,000 casualties a year. Treating the latest is junior surgeon Hugo Guthrie, Army Major, one of 5 ER doctors who are always on their toes.
What we do is quick thinking, fast acting, and there isn't room for passengers.
Dr. Guthrie doesn't intend to be a passenger. He's been an Army doctor for 8 years, but he's still only 33.
I'm seeking to, earn my spurs in this environment because I'm still learning my sort of craft, to have an opportunity to put everything that you've learned, into practice. That's where I get my biggest buzz and my most enjoyment.
Guthrie's an orthopaedic surgeon, fast becoming a specialist in war wounds.
Can you feel your feet?
For a battle surgeon, this is about as tough as it can get.
Let me just start on the good side. Can you feel me touching you here? Can you feel me touching you there?
Dr. Guthrie's patient is an Army private who stepped on a landmine.
There's a large lump of metal that, from the first X-ray, looks like it's, an internal piece of metal. That looks like what he's got, a broken thigh bone.
This man's war is over. His leg will have to be pinned. The surgery will be done here, and then he will be flown home to Britain. Apart from the ER, the hospital has 2 state-of-the-art operating theatres.
If you're not able to perform in that environment, then you shouldn't be in that environment.
35,000 feet above Afghanistan, the RAF transporter carrying the NHS doctors and nurses who are going to take over the running of Bastion's hospital are in the danger zone. Descent.
All lights in the cabin will be extinguished and it will remain that way till on the ground.
These planes are prime targets for the Taliban. The cabin blackout is part of a stealth landing to avoid their rockets. Everyone will also wear full body armour.
People were so tired. People didn't really know where they were because they hadn't slept for, probably 2 days properly.
For the volunteers, this is their defining moment. Few have any real idea of what lies ahead. Suicide bombers. Mass casualties.
They're more than likely getting a 5-year-old with penetrating chest trauma.
A baptism of fire.
The helicopter's taken a couple of hits.
In southern Afghanistan at Camp Bastion, it's day 1 for the NHS doctors and nurses who are going to be running Britain's field hospital for the next 3 months.
You've come from somewhere where there's lots of grass and everything, and then all of a sudden you're in the middle of the desert with nothing around you.
Nothing around you but the Taliban, who are outside the walls, so everyone must be armed. For people who are used to saving lives rather than taking them, it's a stark reminder that they are now at war.
Captain Shepherd! It's just quite nice to have a weapon. This is my personal weapon for this tour. More senior officers will get pistols. So you cleared it? No. Cock it. And use the holder over device to do a check, okay?
That's forward.
Bastion is no home from home, even if it does serve traditional English tea.
Even by my standards, this is a quite appalling cup of tea.
We've currently got 10 people in the hospital, 3 with DMV, 1 in ICU.
The man with the task of commanding the volunteers is a full-time Army officer and Falklands War veteran, Colonel Phil Hubbard. This is his last tour of duty. Back home, it's his job to persuade NHS staff to join up and go to war.
Today they join for very different reasons than they would have done, 10, 15 years ago. They know, they listen to the news, so they can see the challenges. So what brings people to that? I think it is the attraction of using their skills in an environment that is unusual to them, and they want to challenge themselves.
It's not long before they get their first challenge. Not a wounded soldier though, a 12-month-old boy who's been scalded by boiling water in his mother's kitchen. He needs help fast. His name is Bastion, and he's already won the heart of at least one former children's nurse.
When little baby Bastion came in, you would think, gosh, you know, if this had happened to my grandson, Thomas, it would be absolutely devastating.
While Nurse James and the ER team work on Bastion, the rest of the volunteers settle in. And there's good news for Nurse Hawkins and the best mate, Captain Lawrence. Hawkins has found the iron he wanted, and Lawrence has a home video camera.
Here we are in the accommodation of the soldiers. Now, by observing them closely, we can see them in their natural habitat.
Tell me, Daddy, what did you do when you were fighting? Well, I did a lot of ironing.
Simon and I think, are very much on the same wavelength. Both the same age. We've both been working in the NHS for a very long time. And we're extroverts. There's no getting away from that.
The British Army will always look their very best. And it is a tradition that we must keep all our kit clean and obviously ironed.
The medics are happy because Bastion is heavily guarded and fortified, a safe haven far removed from the front line.
It doesn't feel like warfare to us because we're medics. This is what we do. We care for people when they're injured, and they could be injured in road traffic accidents, or they could be injured by, improvised explosive devices, mortars, rocket-propelled grenades, bombs, bullets, whatever. Here, at the moment, the security situation as it is, you don't have to carry your body armour, your helmet, or your weapon with you. This is probably one of the safest places in Afghanistan, I'd say.
Absolutely.
The haven no longer feels as safe. There's been an explosion outside the camp, close enough to concern the garrison and the medics. The hospital and its patients might be at risk. Colonel Hubbard must find out what happened.
Shook the building, so it's certainly a large explosion. Can you see anything over there?
About 300 metres that way. Yeah. We've got what looks like an IED's gone off.
Really?
Yeah, with a brick convoy. There's a couple of guys on the deck. BFA's just gone up.
Yeah, they just cleared the area now.
Well, it looks like a brick convoy that was heading back to Sharabak. And something's gone off in a mound on the ground. And it's caught somebody in it, but I can't see exactly who it is.
The explosion was a suicide car bomb at a British Army checkpoint. One soldier's been caught in it.
Have we got a name for this chap yet?
Thompson.
Dr. Guthrie is duty surgeon.
What are you doing? We're at the hospital at Camp Bastion, okay? It's just down the road from the cookhouse. You know where the cookhouse is at Bastion, don't you?
Another chance for the self-styled rookie to impress.
Pelvis is stable, non-tender. Does it hurt here, yes or no?
No.
Here?
No.
Here?
No.
Here?
No.
Here?
No.
Here?
No.
Can you just reassess his chest again for me? Restart some fluid, yeah. Yeah. Okay, chest x-ray. He's got no human pneumothorax. Lung fields are normal. He's got no obvious rib fractures. No other associated bony injury.
Private Thompson has had a close call. His hands are burned, but otherwise he's unhurt. He knows it, and so does his doctor.
I get involved in what happens emotionally, and I get involved in the process technically. And that is exciting, to be challenged both in terms of what you're doing, but also where you're doing it, and doing it as part of the whole armed forces team.
For everyone, the explosion's been a wake-up call.
That wasn't very far away, and it's our corner of the camp as well. It's about 200 metres from the wall, wasn't it?
Really, really close. You don't realise the potential, really.
They certainly put a dint in our pride that day, and they nearly came and put a dint in us as well.
walls of Bastion on the front line, the British Army is taking on the Taliban. First aid on the battlefield is given by armed medics who accompany every patrol. Men who fight as well as save lives.
We've got a casualty that's come in.
25-year-old Tom Story is one of them. A full-time soldier, Lance Corporal Story has only one aim when someone gets hit: stop the bleeding as quickly as possible.
And the biggest worry is blood loss. It's all about hemorrhage control. You need to keep the circulating fluid in the body. It's better in the body than out the body.
The way the cap tourniquet works, through the top loop here, whack it on them and wrap it round. Blood's oozing out, you want to try and stem the flow of blood.
Combat medical technicians, they are the young men and women that do the combat first aid, and they're there to stabilise them for us so that we can get out to them, pick them up and bring them back. And they're as crucial to the survival of the soldier as the surgeon on the other end.
Story and the other combat medical technicians don't have state-of-the-art facilities. They work out of makeshift first aid posts near the front line. This one's an abandoned garage.
Our medical facility was a 2-bedded medical facility, could take 2 stretcher cases. It had a doctor and 4 class 1 medics in.
It's all a step-by-step approach with medicine. You troops on the ground should have that and your morphine syringes as a standard. Okay, we'll go on to sort of traumatic amputations now. Rounds may be coming down, you may...
Amputation is every soldier's worst nightmare. Usually caused by landmines and what the military call IEDs, improvised explosive devices, booby traps or suicide bombs. Today, Lance Corporal Story has his full medical kit, as well as body armour, gun and helmet, as he and the parachute regiment patrol the streets of Sakala. A small town 100 kilometres north of Camp Bastion, recently captured from the Taliban, it's one of the most dangerous places in Afghanistan.
Even when someone goes up the street with a motorbike or a push bike, or someone comes up with a wheelbarrow, anything that you think might have explosive in it, you're constantly on edge. Especially with these kids, because apparently the suicide bombers get younger and younger. I think the youngest one was 8 or something like that. So, it could be any one of these boys. You just get brainwashed by the Taliban and their teachings.
Suicide bombs are now routinely used by the Taliban. This year, attacks are up by almost 70%.
Anything you see just makes you more and more nervous, really.
Just be aware of the motorcycles. Let's make sure that they keep their hands on the handlebars of the bikes. Just tell them, indicate to them.
You're scared all the time, and anyone who says they're not scared, in my own personal opinion, is lying.
Casualties are recovered from the front line by a Chinook helicopter, Britain's military air ambulance. It isn't marked with red crosses because this would make it even more of a target for the Taliban. The Chinook can get to any part of the battlefield in around half an hour. On board are hospital doctors and paramedics and armed soldiers to protect them.
Equipped, ready to go, and with it goes a team that's force protection. Force protection is its guard.
This is part of the strategy to get wounded men to the ER quickly without them bleeding to death.
Time for us is the crucial thing. The earlier we can actually intervene, the greater the chance of survival. And that extends our capability from the hospital directly to the injury site to snatch people from the jaws of death.
Uniquely, the onboard medical teams are led by a highly qualified consultant, so that casualties get the best treatment as soon as possible. No other army does this.
What it does essentially is take the emergency room to the patient. Our wounded patients, our casualties in Afghanistan, are 35 minutes flying time away from Camp Bastion. Those patients would die if it wasn't for the medical team in the back of the helicopter.
Consultant Davis is a full-time army doctor. But when he returns home to the UK, he keeps his hand in by working in an emergency department in Glasgow.
I have to work as an emergency medicine specialist when I'm not deployed on operations, and the best way for me to maintain my skill set is to work in a busy NHS hospital.
Dr. Davis might be an old hand, his colleague Vanessa Miles isn't. She's an RAF paramedic on her first shift with Bastion's air ambulance.
It's not daunting because basically I've got a really good team around me who have been out here more than a few times, and with 20 years of nursing experience, hopefully I'll be up to the job as well.
Paramedic Miles joined the RAF from the NHS a year ago, fulfilling a long-time ambition to serve on the front line.
I've got a mixed bunch of friends, and some of them think I'm mad, some of them think it's great, but I'm lucky. My mates are definitely very supportive.
Carter, where are you?
In Musa Kala, Lance Corporal Story's worst fears have been realised. A suicide bomber has struck in the heart of the town, not far from Story's first aid post.
Can you film, mate? I need to start helping out.
A home video camera captures the chaos it's caused.
Whenever you hear an explosion, everyone just stops. Did that just happen? Did I just hear that? Am I going mad? All of a sudden these people just came from everywhere.
There is no civilian ambulance service here, only Story and his fellow medics.
Someone comes in a bad way, it's your job to get that person out alive. Go to work straight away, use everything that you've been taught, all the skills.
Get your team medic pack out, take your kit off to start treating some of these people.
There are many casualties, including a number of children.
Yeah, in there, Dodgy, in there. The lads felt his pulse, can't get a pulse.
One child is already dead.
Fortunately, the child had died. It was my first major casualty, but I couldn't stop there because I knew there was another one waiting for me when I went in.
No British soldiers have been hurt.
I felt his pulse.
All Story and his team can do is to try and stop as much bleeding as possible until help can reach them. But will it get there in time, and can the NHS doctors and nurses save the day?
Definitely getting a surgical airway head injury patient. We are more than likely getting a 5-year-old with penetrating chest trauma.
And risking life and limb inside the air ambulance under fire. In southern Afghanistan, Lance Corporal Story and his army medical team have been overwhelmed by the casualties from the suicide bomb in the heart of Musa Kala. One child dead and many more seriously injured. He needs help fast. 100 kilometers away at Camp Bastion, the medical emergency response team is already on its way. This incident is so serious that British commanders have decided to send its air ambulance and Dr. Davis to bring the injured back to Bastion's hospital. For Vanessa Miles, the rookie paramedic, this is the baptism she's been waiting for.
All the information that we had was that there'd been a suicide IED bomber and that there were casualties on the ground.
Inside the hospital, a red alert is in full swing. Mass casualties on the way.
Okay,
running the ER is an NHS volunteer from Bristol, Dr. Adam Brown, a TA captain who's on his first tour of duty.
Definitely getting a surgical airway head injury patient. We are more than likely getting a 5-year-old with penetrating chest trauma and 4 others of unknown injuries at this stage.
It's not just the casualties that Captain Brown's worried about.
The Taliban know that if they generate mass casualties, the helicopter will go out, and knowing that, there's a more than reasonable chance that some of these may be traps designed to snare helicopters, not the civilian life and things like that.
Everyone in the air ambulance knows this. They're now deep inside enemy territory. prime targets. In the hospital recovery ward, Private Thompson, the soldier burned in the Bastion car bomb, is now fully conscious.
There was a civilian car coming up on the opposite side of the road. It was probably about 25 metres away from me, and that is the last I can remember of the actual vehicle itself. And after that, it was just a blur, and I just remember being laid in the back of the snatch armoured vehicle that we use, and I felt as though I was on fire at the time. Somebody up there has been looking down on me. I feel extremely lucky because, unfortunately, there has been other soldiers in this position who haven't been here to tell the tale.
Private Thompson's not the only one counting his blessings. So is paramedic Miles. The air ambulance has made it to Musakala.
It took us a while to get out there because obviously the risk factor, and we brought in 8 casualties.
When you look at the time it's taken, it's just been horrendous.
It's been over an hour since the explosion, and Dr. Guthrie's a worried man.
We talk about something called the golden hour in both civilian and military trauma management, where we like to get patients to us within an hour. You know, the longer the delay to a care facility like this, you know, the worse the outcome will be.
The air ambulance has picked up 8 wounded civilians, 4 of them young children. Paramedic Miles and Dr. Davis are doing what they do best, keeping the kids alive. They haven't yet left enemy territory, and their worst nightmare has come true. The helicopter is under fire from Taliban machine gunners 500 feet below. As the helicopter gunners fight back, the medical team now know what it's like to be a sitting target. They have 80 kilometers to go, and the doctors and nurses at Bastion still don't know for sure what to expect.
Last night we had the trauma call at 3 o'clock in the morning that ran till 5 o'clock this morning, and then we've been working today, and we're here now waiting for what will theoretically be a minimum. If we get 6 casualties, that'll be a minimum 2 hours, possibly 3.
You're in an environment that you do not know what is going to happen. From minute to minute, hour to hour, day to day.
Even as the damaged helicopter comes into land, the medics on board are still battling to stop their patients from dying.
It'll be interesting to see what we got then, won't it?
Yeah. This could be the beginning of a long night.
Takes off, so
As the ER doctors start to do their job,
not see much there. Doctors dressing.
rookie paramedic Miles and the rest of the medical response team are able to reflect on their baptism of fire.
First shift. I don't really know what to say, to be honest with you.
Oh, where are those slippers now when you need them?
That was quite a good introduction because it was night flying.
Yeah, you could say it was quite a good introduction.
It was night flying. It was
under
fire.
being put down on the ground. Rounds coming into the
Don't.
aircraft.
My mum might be watching.
Yeah, no, good skills. I think you've passed the apprenticeship.
The crew of the Chinook were flying bloody brilliantly, basically. It's probably one of the more frightening and difficult such missions I've ever been on.
Do you have some for this guy?
Yeah, there's the results. Get the plasma in a minute. Cheers, sir. It's all good. I need plasma. I need to go back to that level 1 because...
The doctors have managed to stabilize most of the casualties, but one, a 5-year-old girl called Rahima, is barely clinging to life. Her left hand was blown off and shrapnel has penetrated her stomach and other hand.
She's got awful injuries because, the battle between high explosives and, the human body is a pretty one-way affair.
Dr. Guthrie has already amputated most of Rahima's left arm, but he doesn't know yet if enough has been done to save her life.
Blast goes up between the various muscles and tissues and carries with it contamination at a higher level than the actual site of the injury. So although the blast has completely removed her hand, it's also resulted in serious damage to the area from her mid-forearm down, which is why we had to amputate it at the mid-forearm rather than just at the wrist.
Rahima has already touched the heart of Dr. Guthrie.
A little girl here who's been massively wounded by a suicide bomber. He's achieved exactly what he wants to. He's named a beautiful little girl.
The next few hours will be critical for Rahima. All the doctors and nurses can do is to watch and wait and hope that a new day will bring better news. Morning brings little change, but the presence of Rahima and the other suicide bomb casualties on Bastion's recovery ward means other patients must move out. Nurse James is having to discharge Basher, the 12-month-old baby scalded in his mother's kitchen.
I didn't expect so many children to come into the hospital. I thought we might have one or two. I thought they would have gone to their civilian hospital. And little baby Basher would have probably died with the injuries that he had, because the burns are quite bad on his feet and his legs. And with the treatment that he had within our hospital, I don't know if he would have got the same treatment anywhere else.
Nurse James doesn't want to let Basher go, but she must take him to the gates of the camp and hand him over to his father.
It was dreadful. Picked him up, sat him in the front of the Land Rover with myself. I think from picking him up to actually practically get into the front gate, I don't think a word was said.
In Afghanistan, 1 in 5 children don't live to see their 5th birthday.
Okay, you take care. And just to watch them walking up there was devastating, because you're thinking, you've nursed them, you've given them all the treatment, you've given them all the love, care and attention that you can possibly do it, and now it feels as if you're abandoning them. There we are. Shall we go before I cry?
Yeah.
That was really, really difficult. Even though we try not to get attached to these children, I think we have to that little one. So hopefully it's not going to happen, you know, we're not going to have too many more.
Can I have a little listen? Is that okay?
Nurse James may have spoken too soon. 5-year-old Rahima has recovered consciousness. Even though she's still in a bad way, her doctor isn't the only one to fall for her.
1, 2, 3. We didn't think she would live. The injuries that she's had, you know, she's absolutely amazing. She's a real fighter.
She's got those little eyes that stare at you, and she needs your care. And so that's where I have to make sure that I remain objective and slightly divorced from the emotional side of it, and that's not very easy.
Dr. Guthrie hasn't found it easy to divorce himself from Rahima either. Having to amputate her hand was hard enough. Comparing her to his own 18-month-old daughter, inevitable.
It's a lion.
As a parent, you do have empathy with the situation that the people there find themselves in. If I was a parent in Afghanistan with a child the same age, I probably wouldn't even have a hospital to go to. There might not even be a doctor within 2 hours' walk. You know, I might have to spend my life savings getting a taxi to drive me to, you know, a town at the other end of the country.
On a mother's side, you would think, how would I feel, you know, if this was my child? A lot of the girls that had children, and the guys, felt the same really, that it is difficult because it could be your child lying in that bed.
While Rahima begins her recovery, Private Thompson, whose hands were burned in the car bomb, is trying to get his doctors to pass him fit for duty and send him back to the front line.
I'm hoping that I'll be able to stay out here and after a couple of days continue working and carrying with the rest of the tour.
That's a hell of a thing to go through. What it's like being so close to a bomb that's designed to kill you and how he's recovered, mentally, I don't know. Because it's not easy coming back from operations where you've been exposed to that sort of thing and then just throwing yourself back into normal life.
If they're sore with pollen, it's good for you.
Even though Private Thompson wants to be thrown back, the decision can only be made by one man. Bastion burn specialist Major Jones.
There's every chance that we can get you all healed and probably fit to work within about 10 days. So.
Oh, that's brilliant. Yeah, that's great. I can stay out here with the guys and crack on with the rest of the tour.
As Private Thompson celebrates, little Rahima has found an unusual way to communicate with her nurses.
Rahima likes you to draw a face on your thumb and talk to her thumb because she hasn't got any of the fingers, she's only got a thumb. She likes you to talk to her with your thumb. She doesn't know what to do with herself, I don't think. She's hot and bothered. And the sad thing about it is you can't even put her in the shower, which I think would cool her down. She did brighten up the whole of the hospital. It was lovely just to have her there, her happy, smiling face.
She captured everybody's heart. The nurses loved her.
Capturing everyone's heart is one thing. Remaining in the military hospital is quite another. Usually civilians are moved to an Afghan hospital as soon as they are out of danger, but Rahima needs urgent skin grafts if the use of her remaining hand is to be saved. Surgery, which can only be done here.
It's first world medicine compared to almost medieval healthcare in Afghanistan. Although, of course, you do have to remind yourself that they've never had an alternative to that.
Guthrie is not alone in his desire to give Rahima more treatment. His fellow doctors support him. But before they can help, they must all convince the man who controls the ER's beds, Lieutenant Colonel Hill.
We've got a fairly strong feeling on this that this is a child who's probably lost a dominant hand. To get good function, it's pretty important that we try and sort this, and with all due respect, we don't know what the facilities are elsewhere.
Our feeling is that we may want to hang on to her until we can sort the hand out, the other hand, even if it means keeping her here for 10 days or whatever.
Well,
it's just that
that's a big ask.
Well, it is a big ask, but I think we may be bending the rules a little bit. It would be pretty robust elsewhere.
The surgeon's argument is that over half the hospital's beds are empty, so there is room and therefore time to operate.
We're here to provide military surgery, military medicine, military nursing, and it's about keeping the casualty flow going.
It is difficult, but hopefully she will pull through and everything will be sorted out for her, bless her.
Sorting this one out means persuading all of the top brass.
Our mission is to support the UK forces. That's what we're there to do. I have to be very clear when we start admitting and taking on work of what I'm doing, so it has no impact whatsoever on the UK's ability to conduct military operations.
As Rahima's fate hangs in the balance, the doctors and nurses have no idea what lies ahead, or how tough things are going to get.
Trauma team to the emergency department.
This is just appeared at the front gate of the camp from a road traffic collision of some sort.
At Camp Bastion's military hospital, the doctors are still trying to persuade their bosses that 5-year-old Rahima should be given life-changing skin grafts to her hand.
if it's looking pretty okay tomorrow, she may not even have to stay that long.
Meanwhile, Lawrence and Hawkins are on a meal break and wondering whether they should eat healthy or fat.
That's healthy, and that's Fat Boys there.
So the left-hand tent is all the healthy option, and then on the right-hand side it's more your chips and different things that are going to be fat man's food.
And of course, we being the gods that we are to nutrition and fitness, are going to go in healthy. Well, I don't know about you, but I'm starving.
In the hospital, the verdict is in. The doctors can operate on Rahima's hand, but there are conditions.
If we can keep the bed state somewhere between green and amber, and it's in green at the moment, the hope is that we can hold her and do what we can. If we were to take a hit with casualties and the bed state flicks to red, then we do have to get everyone out.
Fortunately, one of the ER's senior surgeons, John McMaster, has the experience to do this sort of complex skin grafting. And Dr. Guthrie, as always, is keen to help.
This is the sort of thing that would normally fall under the remit of plastic surgeons or hand surgeons back in the UK.
This civilian stuff is going to carry on.
Yeah, there should be a hand trauma.
There should be a hand trauma.
Trauma team to the emergency department. Trauma team to the emergency department.
The call to arms is not what McMaster and Guthrie want to hear. The ER is now on red alert. Fortunately, there is only one patient. Another little girl who's been in a traffic accident and is critically ill.
This has just appeared at the front gate of the camp from a road traffic collision of some sort, apparently. That's all we know. Obviously unresponsive. Looks like a head injury. There's some bruising of the lower abdomen.
Trying to save the child's life is David Hawkins, who's switched from his extrovert court jester role to be the lead trauma nurse.
It's coming up to 28 years I've been in the NHS, but I have never seen such trauma in children as I've seen out here.
In the operating theatre, McMaster and Guthrie have reached the crucial part of the skin grafting. They need to be able to finish.
The back of the hand was stripped of everything apart from the tendons, and it's important that those tendons can function because it's our only hand. So we've moved skin around and we've done some skin grafting to cover everything left over.
It will be some hours before the doctors will know whether their unusual surgery has been a success or not. In the ER, trauma nurse Hawkins and his team are fighting a losing battle.
Emergency laparotomy to get fixed. So we're not the CPR is got 8 fixed dilated pupils at the den. Yeah, fixed dilated pupils at the den. And no respiratory effort. Sorry, and 8 systole. When I stop, call it. Yeah.
That's our first child death that we've had. It's very sad. For anyone to say that that does not affect them, then they shouldn't be in the job.
But it's only afterwards that you actually reflect on that could have been my son, or that kid is the same age as my son.
And it is a coping mechanism that I've got used to, that I'm able to do the business. I'll do what I need to do, and then I will switch off and I will become Dave the extrovert again, and I will, I'll have my laughing mechanism or whatever, because that is certainly something that we require out here.
And for Hawkins to switch off usually means switching on the video camera.
You seem to be buying a lot of sweets and crisps when you're supposed to be on a diet.
Well, the doctor said I must eat properly.
Do you think a bag of crisps every night's eaten properly, do you?
I do.
But
I don't eat them unless I've had a full supper.
Back in Musa Kala, Lance Corporal Story's frontline first aid post is again under siege. The children wounded with Rahima have come to have their bandages changed.
Lots of shrapnel wounds, and she was taken to Bastion and her wounds were treated there. As we saw her a little while ago, she wasn't a very happy girl. She was crying and she was in a bit of pain. The wounds have healed very nicely and she's a nice happy little girl. She's smiling, squeezing my fingers. She's a very brave little girl, and her brother as well. Very brave. Good girl.
At Camp Bastion, Rahima is also in good spirits and on her way home to Musa Kala. Her new hand will be fine, provided the suicide bombers leave her alone.
She's given me a lot to live for, and if I'm feeling down, I'll think about her and the achievements that she's gained. And she's got to put a smile on everybody's faces because she was such a beautiful child.
You couldn't help but be impressed by her resilience and enchanted by her smiling and playing as she recovered. She's a pretty plucky little character. I think she'll do very well.
You see?
She truly has become a little angel. Here was a girl who was on death's door and shouldn't have survived the day that she came in, but she did. And I think everybody has had dealings with her in some way. So when she did leave, it was actually a great delight and a joy that we're seeing a miracle.
Next time on Doctors and Nurses at War, trouble in the ER.
Hang on a sec, let's stop and move into the operating theatre. This guy needs to lose both legs in short order.
As Dr. Guthrie tries to save the life and limbs of a Royal Marine.
I don't want any surgeon chopping off my leg because that's probably the right thing to do. I want him to cut my leg off because it's the only option.
Tonight, doctors and nurses from the NHS go to war in Afghanistan, risking their lives to pluck British soldiers from the front line.
Water, now you've got to wait till we get back, but you need an operation to sort your legs out.
Taking the heat from the Taliban.
This guy's bleeding out from his legs, and it comes to a point where it's very much limb versus life.
The fight to save a Royal Marine.
Let's stop and move into the operating theatre.
What's the right thing to do?
There's no rush now. Are you happy with this guy's stability?
Who has the final call?
I don't want any surgeon chopping off my leg because that's probably the right thing to do. I want him to cut my leg off because it's the only option.
This is called a killing house. British soldiers under attack. And hands down.
2, 3 foot window, go!
The blood and injuries may look real, but they're not. This is an exercise involving doctors and nurses from the NHS. Volunteers who are going to spend 3 months at war in Afghanistan.
It enables us to create the kind of atmosphere and environment that would be going on with casualties, so that as close as possible our people can be challenged under realistic scenarios.
The wounded aren't soldiers, they're actors with special qualifications. They've all lost limbs.
Here for the first time we've got an individual that has experienced it, and sometimes in very traumatic situations, and so can deliver that realistic response that we're looking for from a casualty that's had a traumatic amputation.
For the amputee actors, the shocking bomb damage is all part of a day's work, even if you can't always remember exactly how many times you've lost your arm.
5 or 6 already. Probably got at least another 10 or so to go, yeah.
The excellent prosthetic work they use with their fake gore and blood. It does mentally prepare the people who are going to deal with this sort of thing, because if you've never seen someone's leg, facing the wrong way and half hanging off, it can be quite shocking.
We're going to do a couple of pictures first to get you lined up and in the right place. Then the rest of your scan can be together.
Simon Lawrence works in an NHS cancer hospital in Cardiff. He's used to dealing with traumatised patients. He also spends his weekends in uniform in the TA. And for the past 6 years, he's been given time off work to serve on the front line in Iraq and Afghanistan. This time, he's in Helmand Province, helping to run the military field hospital at Camp Bastion. A £10 million state-of-the-art trauma unit, which deals with more than 2,000 casualties a year.
People's lives depend on our skill and expertise, and the troops that are out on the front line have to be confident that the medical services that are backing them up are the very best.
Lawrence is one of 100 volunteers from the NHS who are in Afghanistan. Many are on their first tour of duty.
I need plasma.
David Hawkins, a trauma nurse from Wales, is one of them.
I'm in it because I want to be in it. I want to do something to help support those other individuals that are given 110% on the front line. And if there's anything I can contribute in regards to medical care, then I'll do it.
The front line for Hawkins and Lawrence is the hospital. The closest they will get to the shooting war is cleaning their personal weapons.
We happen to be military medics, so we do some soldier stuff as well. But our job is to be medics, that's what our job is. If this camp came under direct attack, we'd still have a responsibility to look after injured people more than we would defend the camp.
And the injured are already on the way.
Trauma team to the emergency department. Trauma team to the emergency department.
Flying straight over the bad guy.
A military air ambulance is coming in from the battlefield. A soldier's being blown up by a landmine.
Captain Brown, ED.
Dr. Adam Brown is another volunteer. His NHS day job is running an emergency department in Bath.
Cheers and bye-bye. I'm going to change that to a trauma call. That was the helicopter team. Apparently there's tourniquets on both limbs, all right? And they're landing imminently.
On board the air ambulance, a twin-engine Chinook helicopter is a doctor and 2 paramedics and 6 armed men. It's their job to protect the medical staff and the casualty from Taliban attacks. The soldier is in a critical condition and needs surgery fast. Dr. Hugo Guthrie, Bastion's junior trauma surgeon, is ready and waiting. Guthrie's not NHS, he's full-time Army, a frontline doctor for 6 years.
We're a busy armed force at the moment, and wherever the soldiers go, the medical team has to go as well.
Bastion's a far cry from Dr. Guthrie's life back home in Portsmouth.
I've got a young family. I've got an 18-month-old daughter. My wife's pregnant with our second.
Major Guthrie's a self-confessed trauma junkie who's been on the Army medical book since he was in the 6th form. He's determined to reach the top of his profession.
The buzz in surgery is the act of doing something to put it right, something physical with your hands, where you put things that have been disrupted back together. That's where I get my most enjoyment, but also my most challenge, because I'm still learning.
It's now Dr. Guthrie's job to save the life and limbs of the wounded soldier.
Okay guys, let's get them across nice and gently on the monitoring, and then we'll just go top to bottom, okay?
Blood loss kills many Allied soldiers, and that's Dr. Guthrie's first big challenge.
The biggest killer in military penetrating trauma is loss of blood. If you lose enough blood, you can't get oxygen from the lungs to the brain. You're going to be tested, to the level of your expertise and sometimes beyond that. And that's an exciting thing.
That's a clot.
Guthrie's next test involves the soldier's legs.
Can you feel this?
The landmine has done catastrophic damage to both.
Yes. Can you feel this? It's a yes or no. Can you feel this? Yes or no? No. We're trying to assess whether he's got a sensate foot, whether he can move it, whether there's circulation there. These are all just things to build a picture of whether the bones look unreconstructible. He's going to lose this limb, I think, anyway.
Dr. Guthrie now knows the soldier will lose his left leg, but there's still a chance he can save the other.
Regarding his right leg, we'll debride the wound, we'll assess it further, and we'll do our best to save that leg.
As they head for the operating theatre, the doctors and nurses don't yet know how crucial the coming hours are going to be. Landmines on the front line. Royal Marines with terrible injuries and lives hanging in the balance. southern Afghanistan, British troops are moving against the Taliban, on foot and in armoured convoys. The soldiers know Taliban bullets and rockets aren't the only threat. It's landmines they must watch for. They don't always get them all. A mine has gone off under an armoured troop carrier with 3 Royal Marines inside. A medical emergency response team is needed. This is a battle. Leading the team is Dr. Peter Davis, the army consultant who works in the NHS in his spare time, on loan to a Glasgow hospital. He's a trauma specialist, and it will be his job to try and save the lives of the wounded men.
We've got a resuscitation room, an emergency room in the back of the helicopter, and many of the life-saving procedures that we'd normally do in the hospital can actually be done while we're flying back to Camp Bastion. We're bang up to date with the latest advances in technology and in medical practice as well.
Dr. Davis knows this mission is like no other.
Don't want to put any orders, just anything is snelling.
The helicopter is heading deep into enemy territory of the worst kind.
Traditionally, there'd been a lot of Taliban activity in that area, and the threat in daylight was always going to be high. There was the anticipation or the fear, and that's very real. On the way in, when I'm inactive and I'm waiting to pick up the casualties, I'm often quite scared. You know, there's a lot of trepidation involved.
In the hospital, the doctors and nurses are assessing yesterday's patients.
Azim is the chap who came in yesterday, late afternoon, who was in a vehicle struck by a mine.
Dr. Guthrie didn't manage to save the right leg. He had to partially remove both.
He's had a below knee amputation on the left, and he's had a through ankle Symes amputation on the right.
For Dr. Guthrie, it's a chance to think again about the difficult choice he had to make.
You need to look at the overall status of the patient in terms of their stability, their overall stability, and then decide whether you can save this limb or not. You need to be able to look into your heart and know that you've made the right choice.
Making the right choice doesn't always sit well with the patients, and that's where the nurses come in. Azim's soldiering days are over, and the amputations leave him facing an uncertain future.
He wishes that he was dead. Yeah, which is really sad. So it's not the nicest of things, is it, for a young lad? But it's not a lot. You know, hopefully he'll come to terms with it. He's only 19, 20. It's really sad.
Azim is also in tears.
To have a grown man cry in his bed was heartbreaking, really, and he was only a young lad. He's the same age as my 2 sons, you know. And I think, again, you think on a mother's perspective, don't you, of, you know, no matter what nationality they are, you do feel really deep down thinking, oh, you know, it could be my children.
Sue James has been nursing for almost 30 years, but that doesn't make situations like this any easier.
The longer you do your nursing, I think it probably gets a little bit harder the older you get and the more emotional you get.
Azim won't be staying long. The rules stipulate he must be moved as soon as possible to another military hospital, codename Hero.
Pain is quite well controlled at the moment, and I think the plan for him would be for transfer to Hero. And there's no reason why he couldn't go within the next 24 hours.
70 kilometres away on the front line, Dr. Davis is almost at the scene of the landmine blast.
For you, the medics, yep, 3 times casualties at the moment.
News is coming in about the condition of the Royal Marines who've been caught in the explosion.
There's certainly one priority one under the Cat C.
One will die unless he receives immediate treatment from a doctor. Another is seriously injured. The third is already dead. Britain's policy of flying highly trained doctors to casualties on the battlefield gives the surviving Marines a chance.
I served in the Royal Marines for quite a few years, and I have a great affection for Marines.
Provided the Taliban don't shoot the helicopter down before it gets there.
As we flew in very low and very fast, some of the ground troops who were observing the aircraft mission actually saw the aircraft come under fire from a number of firing points.
That vehicle really has taken a big hit, hasn't it? It's in the 5 o'clock, it's still burning.
It really is initially a scoop and run. Get them on board the helicopter as quickly as possible. The crew will then do their damnedest to fly away as fast as possible, and while they're flying away, we're in the back working on the patients.
All right, sir.
The Marine needing do-or-die treatment from Dr. Davis is only 22 years old. He caught the full force of the blast.
First thing that we look for is any obvious massive bleeding from which the patient is going to lose an unsurvivable amount of blood.
His name is Peter Dunning, and he's just weeks from the end of a second tour of duty in Afghanistan.
We don't spare the horses, basically, in terms of what we put forward to try and bring these people back into the field hospital.
Dr. Davis knows this one's too close to call. Keeping Marine Dunning alive is going to take all the medical skills he has.
Marine Dunning was just about conscious. He'd lost a considerable amount of blood, and it was only really because of his great physical strength as a young Marine that he was able to hold on for as long as he did.
Water, no, you've got to wait till we get back, because you need an operation to sort your legs out, okay? You can't have anything to drink, mate. We'll get you're getting plenty of fluid into your veins, and we'll get you sorted after the operation.
We can arrest further hemorrhage, but at the moment we can't replace blood and we can't operate on somebody, so we can't surgically turn the tap off.
The second injured man, Marine Goddard, also has blast wounds to his legs and severe burns to his left arm, but he's not as bad as Dunning.
You're going to be fine, we'll get you back to Bastion in about 5 minutes, alright? You're going to be fine, lad.
At Camp Bastion, the hospital is already on full alert. The surgeons must be ready to operate as soon as the Marines arrive.
We were also very lucky.
Everyone knows blood loss will be a major issue.
Back through down the line into your arm there.
And there's a storm brewing. A sandstorm.
It's probably like this maybe once or twice a week, I think. And this actually isn't too bad. You can actually see things. Normally it's quite dusty.
Lieutenant Jones has only been a TA volunteer for 3 years. She normally works as a physiotherapist at an NHS hospital in Glamorgan. This is her first time in a war zone.
What you look at every day is just this vast expanse of desert. If you're lucky and it's not too dusty, you can see the mountains in the distance, but that's not always the case. Everything's kind of desert colour. The tents are sandy coloured, what we wear is sandy coloured, so yeah, that gets a bit much sometimes.
The storm won't hold up the helicopter, which is just as well. While Dunning and Goddard fight for their lives, Dr. Guthrie, the duty orthopaedic surgeon, prepares himself for his ordeal.
That's fine, crack on, mate, thanks.
Not only is he going to have to perform life-saving surgery on at least one of the Marines, he's working with one of Britain's most senior and experienced general surgeons, Malcolm Loudon. A lieutenant colonel in the TA and a consultant who normally works in an NHS infirmary in Aberdeen, this is Dr. Loudon's 5th tour of duty.
The way things are, I'm probably going to stay in the background because we're expecting further casualties. Best if we don't tear ourselves all up.
Dr. Guthrie knows he's got to be at the top of his game if he's going to impress the man whose job he wants to have one day.
I'm still in training, and so wherever I go, there's always going to be somebody keeping a watchful eye over me and supervising me, so that when I go back and do it as the consultant, I can do it properly.
But Major Guthrie hasn't got time to worry about Lieutenant Colonel Loudon. Marine Dunning is his only concern now. The helicopter has made it. Dunning is still alive, and he and Marine Goddard will be in Bastion's ER within seconds.
There was a sense of, okay, this is why we're here. Now, you know, if there's a time to give, you know, this is it.
Dunning is still in a very bad way.
The patient in this case lost a massive volume of blood, requiring a huge amount of blood transfusion, anaesthetic support and painkillers.
His lower leg between his knee and his ankle was just blown to bits. There was just bone sticking out and everything, but his boot was still on.
35.924. Dr. Guthrie cannot save Marine Dunning's left foot, and unless he can get more blood into him quickly, he might not be able to save his life either. As the doctors try everything they know to keep Dunning alive,
He's losing consciousness and you're to intubate him.
Lieutenant Colonel Loudon is keeping a close eye on Dr. Guthrie.
This guy's critically injured. He's got bilateral, almost complete traumatic amputations. Very unstable. He needs surgical resuscitation.
Loudon is not a doctor who's only prepared to watch and wait.
You want to look over his shoulder?
Monitoring a junior colleague means getting involved, and his experience tells him something else needs to be done.
This needs to be driven into the operating theatre. They're going to intubate him, and they're intubating when he's unstable, which means he'll only get worse in the short term. And he needs his legs off as soon as we get decent access.
Get that off. Arterial blood gas.
He was drifting in and out of consciousness. He was what we call peri-arrest. He was about to die. Yeah, I'm trying to push this through. This guy needs to be in the operating theatre.
Even though Dr. Loudon is not happy with the way things are going, there is little he can do until Dunning is sent to theatre by Dr. Guthrie.
In terms of hemorrhage, we've got two sites of major hemorrhage. They're controlled with thigh caps, and we're just getting a fast scan of his abdomen. Loz is doing that now just to see, because he was painful, was tender, was guarding on his abdomen.
He's obviously lost a lot at the scene. He's lost consciousness now. And in my view, it needs to be in an operating theatre in about the next 3 minutes.
And then we can think about the tourniquet.
Guthrie and his team have managed to stop the bleeding, and the rookie surgeon is determined to do everything he can to save Marine Dunning's other leg. He wants Simon Lawrence to do an X-ray.
Let's give him a chance.
You look at the leg and it doesn't look too bad, and then when you look at the X-ray and you find that the bone has been completely mashed, and you know that leg's going to come off, and it does get a bit depressing sometimes when you know so many people are losing so many limbs, especially legs, because of mines and IEDs.
So then we can exclude blood in the chest, blood in the belly. The pelvis is stable. It's long bones. Okay, long bones, and he's resuscitating. I don't want any surgeon chopping off my leg because he thinks that's probably the right thing to do. I want him to cut my leg off because it's the only option, either to save my life or because my limb is completely unreconstructible.
Okay, Hugo, your haemoglobin is 12.9, your pH is 7.271. After you've done the fast, we'll drop the tourniquets down, and then we'll sort out the theatre pathway.
So I'd like to roll this guy down.
What is the point of readjusting them here? There's an operating table ready. This guy needs to lose both legs in short order. It was a very simple assessment. This leg was dead, and this patient was also going to join the leg if we weren't very careful in terms of getting things done quickly.
The debate about what's best for Marine Dunning is gathering momentum.
Plan operatively in terms of. I just want to sort of so we know which direction we're going in. Are you going to run? Two tables are going to run, or not?
We've asked for the second team to come in.
Okay.
So it gives us that option.
The most senior surgeon in the hospital is now involved, Colonel John McMaster, another NHS volunteer who's a trauma consultant from Oxford and one of the world's leading experts on limb injuries.
Who needs to do what?
I think what we need to do is complete our assessment on this guy first.
Are you happy with that?
Are you happy with this guy's stability? Because,
stability, we've got control of the hemorrhage, so there's no rush now. Okay? There's no active bleeding. Okay, we've got the opportunity to fully assess with X-ray, to know exactly what we're dealing with, because that will make a difference to our management.
well, I might as well use the time in X-ray then.
Okay.
I'm not comfortable, as you can see.
And neither is Marine Dunning. He's taken a turn for the worse. He's bleeding again.
The tourniquets are not controlling it. This guy's bleeding out from his legs.
Doctors Guthrie and Loudon don't have much time. Within the next few minutes, they must decide what is best for their patient and end the debate once and for all.
In these circumstances, you just have to make sure that you save the guy's life.
southern Afghanistan, the doctors and nurses in Camp Bastion's ER are still fighting to save the life and limbs of the 22-year-old Royal Marine who was blown up by a Taliban landmine, Peter Dunning. His doctor, Major Guthrie, is determined to try and save Dunning's right leg. He's already lost his left foot. Dr. Guthrie is working with Lieutenant Colonel Loudon, one of Britain's most experienced general surgeons, who's not convinced that this is the right course of action, or that Guthrie can win the battle of life versus limb.
He's a young, fit soldier who had a heart rate of 155. His normal resting heart rate is probably 50, so he's at the absolute limit of his tolerance. He's already lost consciousness, so clearly, you know, that means the circulation in his brain wasn't good enough. He's got catastrophic lower limb injuries, and it comes to a point where it's very much limb versus life. You know, we can remove the limbs and hopefully save his life.
Lieutenant Colonel Loudon is determined to have his way.
Right, let's stop and move into the operating theatre. Decision made. Yeah. Coming through. We're going to save this guy's life. That's what. About it, taking things in slow time, getting proper views. This guy's bleeding out from his legs, and the tourniquets are not controlling it, and it's moving backwards and forwards. I've been saying for the last 5 minutes he needs to be in an operating theatre as soon as the lines are in. His legs, I mean, they're non-salvageable in any circumstances, but in these circumstances you just have to make sure that you save the guy's life. No British soldier has died on my watch because of limb injuries, and that's the view I hold firmly.
Lieutenant Colonel Loudon's watch extends beyond making sure Dr. Guthrie is doing the right thing.
Well, a bit better.
It involves scrubbing up and helping amputate, making do with a makeshift surgeon's cap of bandages.
See if there's anything else major going. So it's probably not. So, you know, we've got a potentially very viable flap there. Okay, we've got a bit of muscle. And yes, so try and come outside that and not read about it.
While the doctors finish their work, Nurse Jones is trying to make sure Dunning has enough blood to survive.
That's his 8th. As far as I'm aware, 8th in theatre, and he had more than that before he came in as well, so
He's very stable now, alive, he's clotting.
Slowly does it.
I think we have to assume that this guy's...
We've done our bit now, and I think he's got to live with that for the rest of his life, so that's quite hard, really.
I was quite alarmed by how much it affected me. I've got images in my head now of him coming in and him losing limbs and things, and you just think, what would I do? You know, what would I do if that was me?
Well, it's just another young man with no legs. It doesn't really matter how it happens, it's just, you know, I mean... It's just very sad. Mind you, he nearly died, so that's not a bad save.
Three and roll, and back.
On the front line in Musakala, 55 kilometres northeast of Bastion, one of the Army's full-time combat medics, Lance Corporal Tom Story, is hard at work in his makeshift first aid post. This time, the casualty isn't a British soldier, but an Afghan policeman who shot himself in his leg.
Okay. I think he's lost a lot of blood in that because obviously... Yeah, I've done it.
Story and his team are working in an old garage. No state-of-the-art hospital ER for them.
What kind of weapon was he shot with? AK, right, okay. Alright, it's alright. 1, 2, careful, just do it slowly. There we go, got you. See, take that out.
The wound might be self-inflicted, but the risk of bleeding to death is the same.
Yeah, you're in, right.
Lance Corporal Story isn't only concerned about the amount of blood his patient is losing, he's noticed something else.
Tom, go and grab that box from underneath there. Tell him to look straight up. No, look up. Pinpoint pieces.
Oh, the coach stoned out your tree, ain't you? These are all classic signs, bro, which I'll take you. He's quite a chilled out bloke. Suspect he's got pinpointed pupils. He might have had something.
The something could be heroin. 90% of the world's raw opium comes from Afghanistan poppies. Local cops with guns and hard drugs is not good news.
Dad, keep your legs still. Naughty, naughty man. I know it hurts, but you shouldn't have shot yourself in the leg. Hey, one, behave yourself.
He was fighting us all the way and I couldn't understand why.
Stay still.
He was all the time becoming very agitated and he didn't want us to treat him. He was rolling from left to right.
That was you. Oh. What's he saying now? He looked at me, shaking his head. Maybe I won't stop his bleeding then.
Which for someone who's trying to fight you when you're trying to treat them is, you know, you're just thinking...
Tell him that we're going to put something in his leg to help stop his bleeding, okay? It's going to be a bit uncomfortable, but it's for his own good. 1, 2, 3.
Yeah. No, hang on. 2 secs.
Got it.
Get it in. 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 Good lad. Apply direct pressure. Good lad. Well done.
The policeman might be losing the hearts and minds of his medics, but he's still in a bad way and in need of a doctor to inspect his wound.
I want to have a look at it. I want to see the size. Okay. Quite deep, yeah. This guy's gastrocnemius muscles got. Right, we need to.
Dr. David Cooper is a full-time army captain. His diagnosis means the policeman will have to be flown to Camp Bastion for surgery to stop the bleeding.
He's here tonight and he's going to go up tomorrow with a quick reaction force in the morning.
When they're not fighting the Taliban, Britain's armed forces spend most of their time keeping fit. Or at least the soldiers do. The doctors and nurses aren't quite so keen. So the Ministry of Defence offers a reward. Pass a personal fitness test and you qualify for a bonus of up to £1,500, tax-free.
As a 43-year-old male, I have to do 35 press-ups, 37 sit-ups, and my 1.5 mile run in 12 minutes.
Captain Lawrence and his friend, Nurse Hawkins, haven't managed to pass their tests. It's not an NHS requirement, but they've now decided to give it a go and see whether they can collect the bonus.
It is actually tomorrow morning, so we've only got this afternoon to train, and we're both working. We've got to chill, we've got to relax. Be in the right mental frame of mind to do it tomorrow.
You forgot to mention was the 800-metre warm-up prior to the 1.5 mile run.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. It starts at 05:30 in the morning. What's the O stand for? Oh my God, it's early! Yes.
It's not only Hawkins and Lawrence who are trying to pass the test. Nurse Jones is also doing her bit. And as an NHS physio, she's fitter than most.
I think TA sometimes is very difficult to maintain a full-time job and be as fit as someone who is in the regular army, who gets time set aside to do that fitness.
Yeah, I'm a physio, so I've got to give a good impression, I guess. I have not failed one, so I don't intend to now.
However, Captain Lawrence isn't making the progress he needs.
Given that I work back home in an oncology cancer hospital, it's a bit embarrassing to admit that I smoke, but I do.
Inside the hospital, Marine Dunning is still in intensive care.
He's got an IO on his right shoulder, that can come out.
But he's now out of danger, waiting to be flown back to Britain with his colleague, Marine Goddard. In Musa Kala, a heavily armed convoy is about to risk a run through enemy territory. They're not taking on the Taliban, but evacuating the Afghan cop who shot himself to a safe haven where the military air ambulance will fly him to the hospital at Camp Bastion for an operation to save his leg. Dr. Cooper's seeing him off.
We're travelling at first light to FOB Edinburgh, where there's a secure helicopter landing site, so therefore the Merc can come out and take this patient back to Bastion for surgery that he requires on his left lower leg. It's a little bit bumpy for the patient, but we've given him a good dose of painkillers and stuff, and he seems quite comfortable. I'm happy with his obs. So at the moment everything's going fine, as I would like it to go. So 1, 2, 3. Alright, and down. Alright.
Coming up the ramp now. Oh, there are our ramps coming up. Okay, that looks good, everybody.
Every time the medical emergency response team flies, it's estimated it costs Britain at least £40,000. It also puts the helicopter and the lives of its crew in mortal danger. As the shot policeman heads for Bastion, Dr. Cooper heads back to the first aid post with the mail the convoy brought in. For Lance Corporal Story and his medical mates, this is the first news from home for some time.
What have we got? Salt and vinegar? The biggest bit of morale you can get is having mail through. It's definitely a big boost. You hear what's going on back home, and it takes you away from the place you're in.
Try those peanuts, mega. Quavers, hula hoops, Pringles.
Oh, GQ. Way.
It only takes a few minutes to get to Bastion by air. It's been 18 hours since the policeman shot himself, and once again, Dr. Guthrie and his team must try to save a man's leg.
So a bullet can pass through fat or muscle without really inflicting a huge injury. And the other thing that bullets do is cavitate. The temporary cavity expands and then collapses, and as it expands it sucks in debris and dust and other matter from the outside, which is why we have to get rid of all the dead injured tissue and all the contamination within the wounds.
I'll just put a couple of stitches in.
The policeman is lucky. He keeps his leg.
So once you've done your closing and dressing, that's it, is it?
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Marine Dunning, who lost both his, is on his way home. Like all seriously injured British troops, he and Marine Goddard are being airlifted to a hospital in Birmingham for further treatment. With them goes the body of Marine Dale Gostick, the driver of the vehicle Dunning and Goddard were in, who died instantly when he struck the landmine. The flags fly at half-mast as the senior British commander in Afghanistan, Brigadier Mark Carlton Smith, pays tribute to the dead Marine.
The credit belongs to the man who strives valiantly, who at best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails daring greatly.
For those left behind in Afghanistan, there's still much to do.
11:28.
Can Lawrence and Hawkins win their bonus? While in the UK, Marine Dunning relives his worst nightmare.
I looked down and saw that I had no feet.
Dawn, Camp Bastion. For Captain Lawrence and Lieutenant Hawkins, it's the day they've been dreading, the personal fitness test.
Okay guys, the test's going to start in 4 minutes. Alright, we'll start bang on 1:30.
An opportunity opportunity to win a £1,500 tax-free bonus, but also a chance to make a fool of yourself, especially if you are a weekend warrior.
If you're fit and you're used to doing that kind of thing, and you run anyway, it's fine. You don't have a problem with it. But if you don't keep that up through the year, it becomes an issue when it comes to trying to pass to get your bounty.
This is race prep.
Lawrence and Hawkins want the bounty, but they're rank outsiders.
It's been nice knowing you, mate. All that good stuff. Yeah, strength and honour.
The money gets paid if you manage to achieve certain fitness challenges and run 2.5 kilometres within a time limit.
If you don't achieve the standards, if you don't put the time in, you won't get your bounty. It's quite important from a fiscal point of view that we actually do it. It's the stick that goes with the carrot, really.
Press-ups are easy for some.
Stop! Stand up!
Sit-ups are tricky for all.
Stand! Go on, count them.
It's still only 5:45, but the temperature's rising rapidly.
We did our press-ups and sit-ups at 5:30 in the morning, so we could start our run by 6. But it's still blooming hot at 6.
Lawrence and Hawkins must complete the 2.5 kilometres in under 12 minutes.
The times aren't easy. It's actually quite quick to do a mile and a half. So there are some people that struggle.
After 3, 1, 2, 3, slide.
In the hospital, the Afghan policeman is recovering from the operation to his leg. Anaesthetist David Kelly has already been told that he's a tricky customer.
Salam. Salam. Open your eyes on the board. Okay. There we go. There's the salam. Come on, lie down. Tommy's going to injure his leg if he thrashes about. Let's get him back to the ward. He can go.
The policeman will be discharged to a local Afghan hospital
because he's going to fall.
as soon as he finds his feet.
Just relax.
In the camp compound, Nurse Jones has completed her run, 2.5 kilometres in under 12 minutes. Bonus time. The same cannot be said for her fellow NHS volunteers.
11:28.
Come on, good effort, kick on.
12:30. 12:35.
If they wanted Olympic athletes, they'd employ, Olympic athletes.
No, not in time.
It's not only the loss of the bonus that hurts.
I made a valid effort and I kept improving. I mean, my times were improving, but never quite cracked it.
Best friends go back to work in the battlefield PR. They take some comfort from the medical successes of their tour of duty. Over the 2 months they've been in Afghanistan, they've assisted in 17 emergency operations, during which limbs have had to be cut off. Amputations which, to the certain knowledge of the doctors and nurses, have saved lives, which otherwise would have been lost.
It's an end-to-end joined-up trauma care system, and it's producing results which I think really would be the envy of many major hospitals in the UK national health system.
If a patient makes it alive to the hospital, there is a very strong presumption that they should survive.
We, the United Kingdom, have a responsibility to our soldiers. If we're going to send them to these places, they need to be looked after.
4 months after he was almost killed by a Taliban landmine, Marine Peter Dunning is recovering well at a military rehabilitation centre in southern England, and starting to remember what happened to him when he and his mates went after the Taliban.
We didn't really want to stop and try and pick a fight because we couldn't see them at all. They were just pinging off, getting close, and a couple of times I heard a few cracks going past my head and that, so it was quite a hairy moment. Not knowing what's in the ground ahead here, you just have to hope and pray, really. I can't remember anything about it. A couple of lads have been told I got blown clear of it because I was on top cover. I've got no idea how bad it was, how bad what state the wagon was in or anything.
Speak to me. Yeah, okay, good man.
Come in a second. What is the point of readjusting them here? There's an operating table ready. This guy needs to lose both legs in short order.
I would have said I was doped up all the time, yeah, on morphine. I was on ketamine as well, which is a horse tranquilizer.
He's losing consciousness and you're to intubate him.
I looked down and saw that I had no feet and everything. It hit me pretty bad. I couldn't sit up, couldn't do anything. I was just lying on my back all day long, which obviously, from being a fit person like I am to lying on my back doing absolutely nothing was quite hard, really. And I was at Bastion, and I had my company sergeant major, standing at the end of mine and my friend's bed, and I was talking to them. That's when I found out that my driver had unfortunately died. Dale Gostick did die in the incident, and unfortunately I couldn't get to his funeral. But the lads have said that they gave him it was a good send-off. They gave him a good send-off, and they had a good few drinks afterwards as well to celebrate Dale Gostick's life.
Slowly does it. 1, 2,
I'm a lot better from what I was. A lot more at ease with the whole thing now, really. I always keep as positive as I can. As far as I'm concerned, this is just a setback to me, and I'm sure I'm going to get up as strong as I was and as fit as I was, if not fitter.
For Peter Dunning, the next stage in his recovery will be the fitting of artificial legs and learning to walk again.
Stop what you're doing.
Next time, on the front line with the combat medics.
This is the first time I've been anywhere which could be on the edge of my comfort zone.
Picking up the pieces.
Hughes here has sustained a fracture to his right ankle.
Saving lives.
This is going to hurt.
He's a fighter. He's fighting.
And treating the Taliban.
I find it harder to go in and treat him as normal.
Two top guns are locked in combat over a steamy tropical island.
You had to get in really close back in those days, like a knife fight. So you had to have the target fill the windscreen and then press the trigger.
In a desperate dogfight, each pilot tries to lock the other into his gun sights. But then, when they have the perfect shot, they don't go in for the kill. An act of chivalry, a loss of nerve, or a mechanical malfunction. The wreckage reveals the truth behind the dogfight over Guadalcanal. In the skies above Guadalcanal, two fighter pilots duel in a legendary dogfight of the Second World War.
It was one of the epic air battles of all time, eyeball to eyeball, gun to gun, aircraft to aircraft.
This is the high noon of the Pacific War, a showdown between each side's frontline fighter. In a desperate dogfight, each pilot tries to lock the other into his gun sights. But then, when they have the perfect shot, they don't go in for the kill. An act of chivalry, a loss of nerve, or a mechanical malfunction. By the end of the battle, each pilot in his plane will be riddled with bullets. And yet they survive. This remarkable story will lead investigators deep into the jungle of Guadalcanal, where they make an amazing discovery. And finally solve the mystery of the dogfight over Guadalcanal. During 1942, two rival fighter planes fight for supremacy of the skies in the war over the Pacific. The Japanese Imperial Navy's Zero and the US Navy's Wildcat. When the planes meet over the Pacific island of Guadalcanal on August 7th, it becomes an extraordinary test of man and machine. On that day, two outstanding pilots are in the air, Saburo Sakai and Pug Sutherland. Each keeps a detailed journal of the precise anatomy of that first encounter. It is one of the best documented dogfights of the Pacific War.
I could hear the steady stream of bullets zinging in behind me. The after part of my fuselage was like a sieve.
Never had I seen an enemy plane move so quickly or so gracefully before. Every second his guns were moving closer to the belly of my fighter.
Each pilot admires his opponent's tenacity, courage, and flying skills. Both men are at the top of their game. Both realize that they have to push their planes to the absolute limit. To the end, the outcome remains uncertain. Saburo Sakai is 25 and already a proven ace with over 50 kills to his name. His ancestors are samurai. The pilot training scheme which Sakai joins in 1937 imbues him with that same feudalistic warrior philosophy. The school produces only a handful of pilots, but they are instilled with the belief that they will overcome greater enemy numbers because of their rigorous training.
Training in the Imperial Armed Forces was extremely disciplined, extremely difficult. It was downright brutal. Physical punishment was a fact of life in all of Japan's armed forces. Being punched in the face, being hit in the buttocks with baseball bats. This was all par for the course. Sumo wrestling, for example, was meant to instill an aggressive spirit in them. You were in the ring with your opponent, and if you lost, you had to stay there until you prevailed over somebody.
In Sakai's year, only 25 of the class of 70 non-commissioned officers survived the course. He receives the Silver Watch offered each year by Emperor Hirohito for the outstanding student pilot. Pug Sutherland comes from a very different background. He is trained at the US Naval Academy as an officer and gentleman. He has always wanted to fly from aircraft carriers. A fellow Naval Academy cadet and friend who remembers him well is David Richardson.
Pug was an excellent pilot. Pug, of course, means pugnacious. And he had been a boxer at the Naval Academy, very aggressive type, very competent, very cheerful individual, a lot of fun to be with.
Like Sakai, Pug is determined to succeed. His skill at avoiding punches easily translates to ducking and diving in the air, and he becomes one of the best shots in his squadron. But unlike Sakai, he has no combat experience, and he is desperate to engage an enemy. He won't have long to wait. On December 7th, 1941, the Japanese attack Pearl Harbor. On that day, Saburo Sakai is escorting a squadron of Japanese bombers on another mission to destroy US military bases in the Philippines. When American fighters launch a counterattack, Sakai shoots down and claims his first American kill. While Sakai is shooting down Americans in the Pacific, Pug Sutherland is 5,000 miles away on an aircraft carrier patrolling the Atlantic. But with the declaration of war, it is not long before the United States is scrambling to deploy troops in the Pacific to counteract the Japanese onslaught. In June 1942, the Japanese start constructing a landing strip on the island of Guadalcanal in the Solomon Islands. Japan will soon pose a threat to the Allied shipping lanes between the United States and Australia. So the American command decides to launch their first major counterattack. When reports of an almost completed airstrip on Guadalcanal reaches Admiral Nimitz, he orders a 3-carrier task force to invade the island. The amphibious landing by 19,000 Marines is supported by as powerful an invasion fleet as the United States has ever assembled. On July 7th, the carrier Saratoga departs Pearl Harbor, with Pug and his squadron aboard. They are equipped with the Grumman Wildcat, the US Navy's frontline fighter. As they steam across the Pacific Ocean, the officers assemble for a pre-battle squadron photo, an event that gives them pause for thought. How many will be there for the next portrait? On July 20th, the squadron loses 3 Wildcats and damages 2 more while attempting to land after a gunnery exercise. The next day, Pug and his fellow pilots are briefed on their role for the invasion. Stories of cannibalism on the Solomon Islands are rife. They are told not to approach the natives if they have to bail out. On August 7th, 1942, 8 months to the day since the attack on Pearl Harbor, the invasion begins. Shortly after dawn, US battleships start shelling the islands of Guadalcanal and neighboring Tulagi. But the US invasion takes the isolated Japanese garrison by surprise. They are completely overwhelmed. They radio for help, but the nearest Japanese base is 565 miles away, in Rabaul. The base commander, Rear Admiral Yamada, is faced with a daunting problem. Guadalcanal is far away, at the absolute limit of the range of his fighters. Nevertheless, he orders Sakai and 17 of his fellow pilots to get ready to fly there.
We checked the distance from Rabaul to Guadalcanal. It meant a round trip of more than 1,100 miles without allowance for combat or storms, which would consume fuel in prodigious quantities.
As Sakai recorded in his journal, it was to be the longest sortie he had ever been asked to fly. It looks like a suicide mission. But the fabled Zero's lightweight design makes it amazingly fuel efficient. The US Navy had nothing like it.
The Wildcat was at a serious disadvantage to the Zero. Without drop tanks that would fit under the wings, the Wildcat had a typical combat radius of about 200 nautical miles. Now that was fairly representative of most fighters that were flying at the time. But we knew almost nothing about the Zero. It could fly one way, 500 to 550 nautical miles, engage in a dogfight, and return to base all on one tank of gas. And consequently, when Zeros were showing up so far from land bases, the Americans drew the logical conclusion that the Japanese had more carriers than we thought they did.
In creating a fighter that operates in the vast Pacific theater, the designers of the Zero have had to make some compromises on safety. To find out what price Japanese pilots had to pay for the Zero's long range, former fighter pilot Ralph Wetterhahn meets Saburo Sakai's biographer, Henry Sakaida.
You'll notice here, it's like, a lot of GIs, when they came upon crashed Japanese Zeros, they'd take their jungle knives and they would cut a panel out to bring home. These things were just like tin cans, size of tin cans.
I also understand that to save weight for this long-range mission, they wound up stripping the aircraft down of every non-essential item, including the radios, which for a fighter pilot, a radio is pretty darn important to give warnings and to coordinate attacks.
The Japanese Zero radio was very, very inferior, and so what they would do is they would just yank that out of the airplane. They would try to just get rid of any weight they figured was non-essential.
Ralph's keen to learn about the Japanese attitude towards protecting their pilots from Imperial Navy historian Sam Tagaya.
It doesn't appear that the Japanese gave a lot of priority to armor plating and cockpit protection. You can see it's just thin metal on the sides here.
The Zero that Sakai flew, the Model 2-1, didn't have any armor plating or self-sealing fuel tanks. The Japanese combat personnel especially were imbued with this philosophy of always being prepared to sacrifice one's life. Tended to make them think that protective features on aircraft were not a very high priority.
I think the Japanese neglected that, just like they neglected having a good radio. And eventually you find out that you're not going to sustain yourself in an attrition war, which this turned out to be, because you're going to lose your experienced pilots.
The Naval Air Base at Rabaul is home to a group of Japan's most seasoned pilots. When news of the invasion of Guadalcanal reaches Rabaul, the commanding officer immediately orders 27 bombers to counterattack. Although their mission will be to sink transport ships, they do not pause to switch bombs for more lethal torpedoes. Mitsubishi Zero fighters will protect the bomber formation. Just before takeoff, Sakai warns his two wingmen about the American pilots they're about to face for the first time. He orders them to stay in formation.
Above all, never break away from me. No matter what happens, no matter what goes on around us, stick as close to my plane as you can. Remember that. Don't break away.
This is Sakai's last chance to speak to them directly. Once en route, hand signals will be the only way to communicate. By 10 o'clock, a force of 17 fighters and 27 bombers is on its way. Like the Zero fighter, the bombers have no fire protection for their fuel tanks. Their crews call them flying cigars because of their tendency to quickly catch a light when hit. As the aerial armada reaches cruising altitude, the amphibious assault by US Marines on Guadalcanal has already begun in earnest. Below decks on the Saratoga, Pug's team receives news that a large Japanese force is approaching. Fellow pilot David Richardson remembers their reaction.
Were we afraid? Did we have a sense of fear? No, that isn't a part. You fly your airplane. You focus on what you're doing at the time. You really don't think about life and death. What you think about is how do you fight your plane.
Pug has only 8 Wildcats under his command to intercept the 27 Japanese bombers. It takes them 45 minutes to get on station over the transport ships, still disgorging Marines and their equipment. At the same time as Pug's flight arrives, the Japanese formation also gets their first glimpse of the amphibious landing. Even at a distance, Sakai is amazed at the size of the operation.
There must have been 70 transports approaching the beaches, and there were other ships too distant and numerous to count.
After flying for around 4.5 hours, the Zeros drop their empty external fuel tanks. Sakai scans the sky for American fighters. Pug also searches through the clouds, looking for Japanese bombers. His task is to shoot them down, if possible without engaging the Zero fighters escorting them. At 1300 hours, Pug finally catches his first glimpse of the Japanese formation.
Horizontal bombers, 3 divisions, 9 planes each, over Savo, headed for transports. Put gun switches and sight lamps on. Let's go get them, boys.
Pug shoots down the lead bomber and scores the first American success of the air battle.
Pug was an excellent shot. He was among the very best in our squadron, perhaps in the top 4 or 5. Anything that found itself in front of a Wildcat with its 650 caliber machine gun was in very deep trouble. The recoil is powerful. Physically slows you down. It's as if you were flying into a brick wall.
Despite taking some hits, Pug destroys the bomber. but he is now a marked man. The Zeros are onto him, and he needs every trick in the book to fend them off. Although the Wildcat would win no beauty contests and lacks the rate of climb and acceleration of the sleek Zero, it can dive faster. Tactics were soon devised to exploit this advantage.
The United States naval aviators used boom and zoom tactics. They would get the Wildcat as high above a Zero or a Japanese formation as possible, shove everything forward, full throttle, make a high-speed dive, shoot, pull out, use the momentum from that dive to zoom climb to the perch again, and if they were in a position to re-attack, that's what they would do.
Because the bombers were so close to their target, Pug had no time to climb and attack them from above. Sakai watches in dismay as every single bomb crashes harmlessly into the ocean.
It was obviously stupid to try and hit moving ships from 4 miles up. I could not understand the failure to use torpedoes which had proved so effective in the past.
After the failure of their mission, the Japanese bombers turn around for the long journey home. Disappointed that they have not hit a single ship, Sakai is desperate to shoot down an enemy aircraft. As he searches for the chubby Grumman-built Wildcats, he spots an extraordinary dogfight several hundred feet below him. It is Pug Sutherland, neatly evading several Zeros. Sakai is amazed at the skill of the Wildcat's pilot.
The Zeros should have been able to take the long Grumman without any trouble. But every time a Zero caught the Wildcat before its guns, the enemy plane flipped away and came out again on the tail of another Zero. I had never seen such flying before.
2 of his assailants are Sakai's wingmen. Seeing how the Wildcat is exploiting their inexperience, Sakai signals that he wants to join the fray. He dives in and fires a burst from long range. Pug immediately retaliates by climbing towards the belly of Sakai's Zero. The historic duel has begun. Sakai tries to throw Pug off, but he matches the Zero turn for turn.
We held to the spiral, tremendous G pressures pushing us down in our seats. A gray film seemed to be clouding my eyes.
As the jungle of Guadalcanal rushes towards his fighter, Pug pulls out of the spiral and climbs into a loop. This is a mistake. A Zero easily outturns a Wildcat in such a maneuver.
I went right after him and came out on his tail. I pumped 200 rounds into the Grumman's cockpit, watching the bullets chewing up the thin metal skin and shattering the glass. I could not believe what I saw. The Wildcat continued flying almost as if nothing had happened. A Zero that had taken that many bullets would have been a ball of fire by now.
The Wildcat's manufacturer, Grumman, designed a cockpit that can handle a lot of punishment.
Sutherland was pretty well protected from any stern aspect because this plate goes from almost the top of the canopy clear to the bottom of the cockpit floor.
I was deeply grateful to the manufacturers of the armor plate, for I could hear the steady stream of bullets zinging into it behind me.
That's what Pug Sutherland was hearing, sort of the rattle on the roof of these small caliber rifle bullets.
Such small bullets have little impact on the heavily armored Wildcat.
The forward part of the windscreen has a 3-inch thick segment of laminated glass. It's called armored glass, and that will stop a 7.7 fired from almost any distance. Because of the durability of his airplane, because of the armor plate around his cockpit, and because of the self-sealing gas tanks that prevented catastrophic fires in flight, Sutherland was able to survive against 3 or 4 Zeros.
But the Zero has a much more lethal weapon, a cannon mounted on each wing.
Sakai and some of the more proficient Zero pilots like to use the 7.7s as ranging, and once they were hitting with those, then they haul out this Hummer, which is a 20-millimeter shell.
In order to fill his gun sight for a cannon burst, Sakai accelerates closer to the Wildcat. But he is in for a surprise. Pug is about to put the brakes on.
I slammed the throttle forward just as the enemy fighter lost speed. In the moment, I was 10 yards ahead of the Wildcat, trying to slow down.
Pug has laid his trap well. The Zero is now in his gun sights. Sakai braces himself for the inevitable end.
I hunched my shoulders and prepared for the onslaught of his guns.
Yet nothing happens.
No bullets came. The Wildcat's guns remained silent. The entire situation was unbelievable.
Mysteriously, in that brief, vital moment, Pug Sutherland does not go in for the kill. Was his plane damaged? Were his guns jammed? Or does Pug just fail to pull the trigger for some reason? Sakai could not believe his luck. He immediately takes evasive action to avoid the Wildcat's line of fire. He drew up alongside Pug's plane. Looking across at the American pilot, he sees he is wounded.
Blood stained his right shoulder. I saw the dark patch moving downwards over his chest.
Now it is Sakai's turn to hold fire. For a moment, Sakai hesitates to deliver the coup de grace.
I honestly didn't know whether or not I should try and finish him off. Such thoughts were stupid, of course. Wounded or not, he was the enemy.
Now, one of the things that I find interesting about this particular dogfight is that Sakai shows a little mercy.
Well, the Japanese Zero pilots, they're trained very harshly, and their attitude was kill or be killed. Sakai, he knew very well that the American pilots were very tough, and that if he had allowed them to escape, that they could be up the very next day to kill his comrades. So I don't believe that he would have shown any mercy at all.
Not everyone who met Sakai came away with the same impression.
He was a genuine gentleman, but he saw a fellow aviator who was obviously wounded, and at that moment, Saburo Sakai decided that humanity outweighed duty, and he decided to let Sutherland live.
Sakai will claim in his memoirs that he deliberately avoided aiming his guns at the pilot. But when Pug jerks the Wildcat into a climb, Sakai knows the plane must be destroyed.
That was it. I aimed carefully at the engine.
A Zero put a burst just under the left wing root. I dove over the right side.
As Pug bails out, his gun is ripped from its holster. He manages to open his parachute less than 400 feet above the jungle canopy. As he falls to earth, he sees his plane explode. "64 years later, questions still remain about the events leading up to Sakai's final gun burst. Did he really spare Pug's life on purpose? And why hadn't Pug fired when he had the chance? To search for answers, Ralph Wetterhahn is heading to Guadalcanal to examine the recently found wreckage of Pug's plane. Pieces of the Wildcat are scattered deep in the jungle, but Ralph believes that his experience as an Air Force crash investigator may help him discover clues about what really happened that fateful day.
I think the important thing for me working my way through the story is to get inside the minds of both men. By confirming certain aspects of the story, of which there are many different versions, we can find out how they really thought and how they really acted and what really transpired in those moments over Guadalcanal and on the land.
Ralph has heard reports that a local man, Edlon G., has found wreckage that could be Pug's plane.
Hello, I'm trying to find Edlon. Do you know Edlon?
This is Edlon's village.
Ah, success. Thanks a bunch. I appreciate it. Enjoy the water.
Got a truck.
The man with Edlon is Justin Taylor. Justin has devoted his life to tracking down World War II aircraft wrecks in the Pacific.
Hi, Justin? Edlon?
Justin Taylor. Nice to meet you.
Okay.
2 years before, Edlon led Justin to a wreck site 2 hours from the village.
Can you give me some details?
Justin took some pictures of numbers on the plane to confirm its identity.
Yeah, well, that's the tail So this is taken from the actual wreckage, huh?
That's correct. You can see here, it's the light blue colored paint of a U.S. Navy aircraft from World War II, the stenciled Navy, and below that, the airplane's bureau number, in this case, 5192.
Have you traced the tail number back to find out the history of it?
Yes, without a doubt, this bureau number makes it an airplane flown by a pilot named James Sutherland.
To locate the wreck site, Ralph, Edlon, and Justin must go on an arduous trek through the same jungle terrain that Pug Sutherland endured when he parachuted out of his plane.
All right, one of the interesting things about this epic encounter is it didn't just end at the completion of the dogfight. In fact, for Sutherland, his troubles were just beginning.
A 1-hour climb brings them to the top of the ridge that overlooks the valley into which Pug's plane crashed.
Yeah, you can almost picture him leaping over the side and free-falling at distance, and then poof, the parachute opens, and the next thing you know, he's in the trees. He begins by doing the right thing. He knows he's got to get away from the parachute landing area because that's where any search effort is going to begin. They will focus on that and try to track him down. But he's operating on adrenaline at that point, so all of his wounds, he's either ignoring them or not feeling them. Then he gets in cover. And he takes an assessment of how bad off he is, and he's in pretty bad shape, especially the bullet that's gone through his foot. He spots some Japanese in a tower that are actually searching for Americans, but he sees them first and decides to avoid the high ground and the easy movement areas and get back into the dense jungle.
Pug is now in a dangerous situation as he crosses enemy-held territory. He lost his handgun when he bailed out, so he has no way of defending himself if he stumbles into a sentry.
Once he descends into the jungle, his problems compound somewhat. First of all, I mean, I'm just standing here and the sweat is pouring off me. He's trying to move away from the danger area, so he's profusely sweating. He's got adrenaline coursing through him. He's got to deal with snakes and insects and vines that have thorns on them like barbed wire, and the disorientation that occurs with a 200-foot canopy above him where he can't tell east from west because he has no idea where the sun is. So all of these things are hitting him, bang, 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 one after another, but he's making the right decisions. He's going the way that's going to keep him from being observed, and he's keeping his wits about him.
For Ralph, the scramble from the ridge to the bottom of the ravine is exhausting. He is relieved when Edlon eventually guides him to a section of the stream that runs along the valley bottom. This is where the remains of the Wildcat are scattered. Finally, Ralph reaches the first piece of wreckage.
Pratt & Whitney, for sure. First thing I notice is the condition of the prop here. You can see there's been battle damage, and there's clear evidence of the damage. 2 penetrations right here. The top one looks to be about 7.7 millimeter. The holes are from the rear forward. You can see the extrusion coming out on the forward side here. So this engine's seen action.
In Sakai's account of the dogfight, he claims to have aimed at the Wildcat's engine. So Ralph wants to check it for signs of damage.
You can see this cylinder has fallen away, and the other 2 are missing. If they had been blown off, you would see some deformation of the cylinder well here, and I can't see, and I don't feel any slivers of metal coming through there, but again, they may have rusted off. As I come around to the back bank of the cylinders, this one, for sure, we can determine there's been a problem.
Ralph is looking at what remains of the circular bank of cylinders from the Wildcat's radial engine. He discovers that one at the back has been hit by what he believes was probably a large caliber shell.
That gives a lot of credibility to what Sakai claims when he says he fired at the engine. And we have clear evidence that something very powerful has hit this rear cylinder and knocked it all to hell and gone. Everything I've seen here is consistent with the Pug Sutherland story and the Saburo Sakai story, and so that's impressive. There's a piece of history right here in front of us.
But the big mystery of why Pug didn't fire his guns when he had Sakai in his sights can't be solved by looking at a rusty engine. To answer this question, Ralph will need to track down the Wildcat's machine guns. These are located in the wing that was last seen further up the ravine. Unfortunately, a large mudslide has recently come through this gully. It is obvious that much of the remaining wreckage has been swept away or buried. Eventually, the team finds a small piece of wing.
Oh, Justin, I was hoping we'd find a whole lot more of the wing up here. I mean, we've got a little bit here. The wingtip, pretty evident. It's got the navigation light here. You can see the bulb, and part of the filament still exposed there.
During my first visit, Edelon and I, we found the U.S. Star, the wing, and you can see from all this severe erosion that Mother Nature has carried those items further down.
I was hoping to find...
But as Ralph and Justin discuss abandoning the search, Edelon, the man who first found the wreckage, has spotted a crucial new piece of evidence.
Oh my God.
Woo!
He has found a .50 caliber round from the Wildcat's wing-mounted machine gun.
Okay, this is a 50, and lo and behold, it shows battle damage. I mean, this round has been hit with something, and so that explains what happened to at least one of his guns. We know Pug had at least one live bullet left. So it's really a significant find, and it makes this whole trip well worthwhile, one little bitty round that we found.
Ralph is keen to search for more wreckage, but Cyclone Jim is forecast to hit the island that day. And Edelon warns that there is only an hour of light left to complete the steep ascent ahead of them.
Oh, I'm whipped. I mean, we've come down that ridge into the ravine and then clawed our way up to the top here. But none of us have any bullet holes in us. None of us are bleeding. None of us are in shock from having bailed out of an airplane that's just been shot to pieces. And the only thing that I can think about right now is what an amazing feat Pug Sutherland accomplished getting out of this stuff. This is awesome.
After several hours, Pug finally makes it through the jungle and reaches the coast. Exhausted from his trek, he collapses under a log. He is completely dehydrated from the experience. When he wakes up, he is desperate for a drink. Some teenage boys from a nearby village spot Pug and offer to look after him. One of them, Bruno Nana, still lives in the same village. Ralph is keen to meet him.
This man is named Ralph.
Ralph. Good to meet you.
Yeah, thank you.
Living history. Bruno, do you remember that morning, August 7th, 1942, here on Guadalcanal?
Yes.
And what did you see?
American plane, big plane with small plane fighter, and big ship, boom, boom, and war, all day, all night.
Despite the risk of Japanese reprisals, Bruno is determined to help the wounded airmen.
Well, he was quite friendly, and he was in a lot of pain from his bullet wounds. He needed help, and he wanted me to take him to Lunga Point. There wasn't enough time to organize the trip, so we took him to our village and fed him. I cleaned his wounds and stayed with him through the night. At about 4 o'clock, I woke him and took him to the beach. When we arrived, my friend had got a canoe ready. After paddling for some time, he saw some soldiers on the beach. We hoped they were American, as he told us to paddle to the shore. The Marines asked us, "How can we thank you for rescuing our friend?" We said we don't want anything,
but they insisted on giving us food and cigarettes.
Unknown to Bruno and his friend, Japanese soldiers witnessed the whole exchange.
As we paddled back to our village, more soldiers waved at us. But this time they were Japanese. They forced us to come ashore, then they destroyed our canoe.
As a punishment, they are tied to a tree for 4 days, without food and water.
We were really thirsty, but instead of water, one of the soldiers gave us urine to drink. Before dawn, on the 4th night, my friend worked his ropes loose. He freed me, and we escaped back to our village.
Around Bruno's village today, there are still plenty of reminders of the battle for Guadalcanal. Among many pieces of wreckage is an intact wing of a Wildcat. Ralph is curious to check out the mechanism that fed 50 caliber bullets to the machine gun.
Ever since Edelon found that round at the crash site, I've been trying to piece together the possibilities that Sutherland encountered in terms of how his guns were functioning during the rest of that dogfight. Now here we have a wing of a Wildcat, and here's where the 50 caliber machine gun would be mounted. Right underneath where my hand is would be the ammunition drum that would feed 50 caliber ammunition, as I'm showing you here, through a very narrow chute. It's over a roller and through this area. And the tolerances, as you can see, are fairly tight. It's hard for me to get these rounds to move smoothly. What this tells me is that this system had very tight tolerances. Any abuse is going to give you problems with jamming. And Sutherland had plenty of abuse.
In his journal, Pug describes battle damage received during his first attack.
My fuselage aft had been hit, probably by the bomber's tail gunner. My windshield had shattered from a glancing shot.
Edelon has been back to Pug's crash site to look for more evidence. His eagle eyes have spotted another important find.
Oh my.
There's no doubt what that is, right?
That's a .45 automatic, pistol. And that's the type of weapon that Sutherland had, and it's the type of weapon that, and holster mechanism that got hung up as he was trying to bail out over the side of the aircraft.
That's right.
So this is an amazing find.
It's hard to prove conclusively that this is Pug's gun. But the fact that it was found right at the crash site is enough to convince Ralph.
I'm holding the weapon that Pug Sutherland had in 1942, on the 7th of August, the opening day of the air battles over Guadalcanal. This is an incredible piece of history here.
Amazing. Amazing.
All right, what else have you got?
Edelon has recovered more ammunition from the Wildcat's guns.
And again, you can see it hasn't been fired.
Yeah, the primer's still intact. It hasn't been hit by the firing pin. And now we've got 2 more rounds. And that's pretty conclusive evidence that he had significant amounts of ammo still left in that aircraft.
He's very happy.
On his last night on the island, Ralph carries out a closer examination of the damaged 50 caliber round found at the wreck site.
I think we've come to some conclusions that clear up a lot of the mystery. One of which is, why didn't Pug shoot down Saburo Sakai when Sakai wound up flushing out in front of him for that brief period just before Sakai finally moved back and shot down Sutherland.
Ralph is convinced that this 50 caliber round from Pug's plane exploded in the ammunition belt feeding the machine gun.
The very end, the neck has flared somewhat. That would not have occurred due to impact damage from the crash. That can only occur if this round is fired outside of a chamber of the 50 caliber machine gun.
So what caused this round to detonate prematurely?
Pug attacked a Betty bomber, and during that attack, he came under fire from 2 weapons on that Betty bomber, a 7.7 millimeter round and a 20 millimeter round. We know that some of those rounds hit his aircraft because Pug reported that his windscreen was damaged. That could only be done by the 7.7 millimeter round. A 20 millimeter round would have done a lot more damage than simply crack If we take a 7.7 round and then place it in position on the 50 caliber round, we will see that it fits nicely into this groove that cracked open the belt. I mean, this is an amazing discovery. This really is the Rosetta Stone of the Pug Sutherland shoot-down.
Ralph thinks that when Pug's plane was hit by 7.7mm bullets from the bomber's gunner, one penetrated his wing and caused a round in the machine gun belt to explode, which jammed the gun. Sakai was lucky. His life was probably spared by the damage to the Wildcat's machine gun. Having survived this narrow escape, Sakai could have turned around and headed home with the bombers, but he doesn't want to. This battle is far from over for him. He searches the skies for more Wildcats.
Far in the distance, he saw 8 dots, and thinking they were fighters, he just pulled away from his wingman and he just opened full throttle and he went after him. And when he was about, 300 yards, he realized, uh-oh, you know, these are dive bombers and they have tail gunners pointed at him. So it was too late to turn back. And he opened up with everything he had right through the formation. And that's when he got hit. One of the tail gunners, he actually was so close that he saw Sakai's face. He saw Sakai go back in his seat like that, and it was like a flash on a movie screen, boom, and he was gone.
I blinked several times. What was wrong? Everything was so red. A wild panicky thought gripped me. I might be blind. Then I shifted my feet to the rudder bar. Only my right foot moved, and the zero skidded as the bar went down. My whole left side seemed to be paralyzed.
Bullet fragments from the dauntless dive bombers have left Sakai seriously wounded. Sam explains to Ralph how keeping the plane airborne would turn into the most formidable endurance test Sakai had ever faced.
When I interviewed Sakai, he showed me his flight goggles and the flight helmet he was wearing at the time of this mission. And the bullet actually entered his head just above his right eye and smashed the rim of his goggles. And it actually exited in the back of his head. It's quite apparent if you actually take the helmet in your hand, the leather helmet, and see where the entry and the exit was.
So it went through his skull?
It went clean through his brain. And it's a miracle that he wasn't instantly killed. The fact that it smashed the windscreen as it came through slowed the bullet down just enough that it didn't kill him. Instantly, the entire left side of his body is paralyzed. He can't move his left arm, he can't move his left leg.
To stop himself lapsing into unconsciousness, Sakai gave himself jolts of pain by irritating his wounds. He is so convinced he will die, he decides to end it all in a kamikaze blaze of glory.
There was a period of time when he flew back and forth trying to look for enemy ships to crash into. And so he would fly this way, then turn around, and he would kind of zigzag a little bit.
If I must die, at least I could go out as a samurai. My death would take the enemy with me. A ship. I needed an enemy ship.
But then finally, he told me that he saw a vision of his mother saying, "Son, wake up, you know, get a hold of yourself. Point your zero in this direction." So he said he pointed his zero in this one certain direction and just prayed that he would make it home.
I don't think it's easy to appreciate that epic feat of airmanship that took place with this guy with no navigation instruments, no radio, other than a compass, and a bullet through his head. Is just an astounding achievement.
It's one of the epic flights in aviation history.
After an agonizing 5-hour flight, Sakai, blind in one eye, paralyzed down one side, and barely conscious, finally brings his plane down at the base in Rabaul.
It was one of the epic air battles of all time, and one man comes out a victor. But it doesn't end there. The epic nature of this battle continues for both of them. Later on in life, they both had to look back upon it as the greatest adventure of their life.
Even though Saburo Sakai and Pug Sutherland suffered serious injuries on that first day's dogfight over Guadalcanal, they both recovered and went on to fly more combat missions. With only one eye, Sakai made further kills. By the end of the war, he had become the Imperial Japanese Navy's highest scoring ace, credited with destroying 64 Allied planes. Pug also recovered and became an ace. He was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross. He returned to the Naval Academy and taught new pilots to fly. Then, in 1949, James Pug Sutherland was killed in an accident while taking off from a carrier. After stepping from his Zero for the last time, Sakai vowed never to kill another living creature again, not even a mosquito. After the war, the Allies banned Japanese pilots from flying. He became a practicing Buddhist. Later, he actively sought reconciliation with the Americans he once fought, even meeting Harold Jones, the rear gunner who shot him in the head. His memoirs of these wartime flying adventures were turned into a popular movie in Japan. He died in the year 2000, aged 84. Amazingly, Pug and Sakai survived their first day of dogfighting over Guadalcanal. But August 7th, 1942 was a day of reckoning for both sides. One of Japan's top guns was sidelined from the campaign, and 5 of the 8 Wildcats under Pug's command were lost. However, during the next 3 months, the fortunes of war favor the Wildcats. 42 Japanese Zeros are destroyed at a cost of 41 US Wildcats. Although Zero pilots held the early advantage, Wildcat pilots soon learned to make the most of their sturdy fighter. The capture of the Guadalcanal airstrip on August 7, 1942, proved to be the turning point in the war against Japan. And Pug Sutherland and Saburo Sakai's exploits on that day remain a soaring example of the courage and skill of the true fighter ace.